So the claim that I'm responding to today is that nuclear power has significant advantages over other forms of energy. And the advocate's secondary claims were CO2 emissions have significantly decreased as a result of nuclear power production. The dangers of nuclear energy are insignificant compared to the dangers we face day by day. And nuclear power is less damaging to the environment than alternative forms of electrical production. So my response to the first claim is that the advocate used the Rasmussen report to defend this claim, and it's invalid since it was done so early. It was done in 1975 and it's no longer relevant, and it has also been proven to be incorrect. So there's statistics on the Environmental Protection Agency website that shows from the years of 1970 to 2013, CO2 emissions have actually increased by 90%, and the Rasmussen report, since it was taken in 1975, was proven to be invalid since for the following 37 years, the emissions increased instead of decreased, which is what the advocate argued. My second response would be that the dangers we face day by day are mainly due to human error, and that's not something we can avoid. And these are also the same mistakes that cause the most dangerous parts of the power plants. So Bernard L. Cohen, which is a physicist and a former professor at the University of Pittsburgh, supports this in saying that these materials can come into contact with people through small releases during routine plant operation, accidents in power plants, accidents transporting radioactive material, and escape of waste from confinement systems. So most, if not all of these examples are due to human error. So there could be an accident in the power plant that can cause some type of explosion or an extreme case of being subjected to radiation. And Cohen also says that in the worst accident considered, it's expected that the cancer deaths would be among 10 million people. So in response to the advocate's third claim would be that nuclear power plants may not directly emit significant CO2 amounts, but building them increases it dramatically, causing them to be more detrimental to the environment. So a scientific journalist, Kurt Kleiner, wrote, "While it's understood that an operating nuclear plant has almost zero carbon emissions, it's the other steps involved in the provision of nuclear energy that increase a carbon footprint. Nuclear plants have to be constructed, uranium has to be mined, processed, and transported, and the waste has to be stored, and eventually the plant has to be decommissioned. All of these actions produce a huge amount of carbon emissions." He also said that a nuclear policy analyst supported his claim by saying that there is no such thing as a carbon-free source. We're better pursuing renewable sources such as wind or solar if we wanted to get more bang for our buck. So in conclusion, I feel his claim would be incorrect since there are other more significant ways to get energy such as wind and solar that's natural and almost free.
All right, structurally everything's set out pretty clearly. On the first point, it seems like it's a challenge to the Rasmussen report on the issue of CO2. I don't remember that Rasmussen talked about what the CO2 emissions were. Your argument seems to suggest that there's been a substantial increase in CO2 since 1972, but I don't know what the number of nuclear power plants was in 1972, what it is now, and whether or not there's any connection to the increase in the CO2 or the decrease in CO2 as a result of those power plants. I think it's a little bit ambiguous as to what this statistic means. There's a big inference being made here that by the advocate that CO2 would be reduced if we were using nuclear power instead of fossil fuels, and I don't know, whether or not the advocate's evidence really proved that particular point. Your analysis is really a little bit more general about the total amount of CO2 that's being produced. So I think that that's a little bit problematic. It's not specific to those points. The second point on the dangers, I think, does suggest that there are substantial problems. I don't know that it quantifies what those risks are, but it does talk about what the impact of those would be. And I don't know if we have a likelihood of this accident where 10 million cancers are going to occur, because that's the worst case scenario, but how likely is that worst case scenario? I don't really know. The contrast would then be, what is the benefit of having reduced CO2 or these other kinds of things in contrast? And again, there's not really much contrasting data on those particular points. On the last argument, I think that you have a very good explanation about why there is a bigger CO2 footprint than is originally projected. Again, we don't get any numbers on this, but we get a nice explanation about what's involved here. I think your argument at the end, suggesting that there are other types of energy, would be more useful to you if you point out that the advocate's argument was predicated largely on us using fossil fuels as a source of energy, and you could be arguing, like you did, that we have these alternative energies. I just think that you could develop that argument a little bit more, and I think it would be more convincing as a consequence. All right, thank you.